Let me tell you something, and I want you to feel it. Not just hear it. When the narcissist walks in, chin high, eyes scanning the room like a spotlight desperate for a stage, don't let the show fool you. That ain't courage. That's camouflage. That's not confidence. It's a desperate cover-up. Because real power doesn't need applause. Real power whispers when everyone else is shouting. It's rooted, gentle enough to love and strong enough to stay. See, the narcissist isn't battling you. Or the boss. Or the critics out there. The real war. It's in the quiet, in the cracks of the mirror they won't dare look into. Because deep down, behind all that noise and bravado, there's a wound that never got to heal. A wound that started back when they were told, maybe with words, maybe with silence, that their softness was a liability. And so, they built a fortress, not out of bricks but out of performances. Every smile, every flex, every spotlight moment. It's all part of the act. Because if they're not adored, they vanish. If they're not controlling, they unravel. Not out of evil. Out of fear. Fear of being invisible. Fear of being unremarkable. Fear of being seen. Not for the version they project, but for the soul that's been shivering behind the curtain all along. And oh, that masculinity they wear like a badge, that isn't boldness, that's trembling covered in steel. A performance rehearsed to perfection. Be hard. Be loud. Be untouchable, but not once does the script say be real. Be wounded. Be open. So what do? They shove down the child who used to cry. The one who used to reach for love with hands wide open, before those hands were taught to grasp, to grip, to guard. They learned that love was conditional, that tenderness was a target. So they stopped reaching, and started performing. By the time you see the narcissist, the act has become the identity. But make no mistake, what you're watching isn't a man in full, it's a survivor in costume, the strut, the dominance, the cutting words. It's not power. It's protection. A shield forged from pain too deep to name. You've seen it, the one who talks loud but listens little, the who dominates a conversation not to connect, but to distract, who wears their success like armor, but crumbles when silence enters the room. Because in that silence, they hear the truth that says you're terrified of not being enough, of not being noticed, of not being loved unless you perform. That's not love, that's torment in disguise. And somewhere along the way, the narcissist started to believe their own myth. They traded vulnerability for victory. Replaced tenderness with tactics. They buried the parts of themselves that felt too soft, too fragile, too human, and called it growth. But a soul was never meant to be armored. So they grow older, but not deeper. They chase titles instead of trust, power instead of presence, dominance instead of depth. And somewhere in that chase, they forget that real love, real connection, it doesn't demand that you win, it asks that you show up. But how do you show up when you've never been taught that you're enough as you are? Here's the heartbreak of it, at all. They don't even know they're lost. Because when you wear a mask long enough, you forget what your own face looks like. They don't run from closeness because they don't crave it. They run because to be truly seen is to risk being rejected. And that's a pain they swore they'd never feel again. So, they keep the performance going, they keep the applause coming, keep the distance wide. But way beneath it all, under the suits, the strength, the script, there's still that child, waiting to be seen, not as a performer, not as a protector, but as a person, flawed, afraid, tender, and still worthy of love. Let me say something to whoever needs it today. Healing doesn't start with power. It begins with permission. Permission to be broken. Permission to feel. Permission to stop performing and just be. And for the narcissist, that's the first miracle. The courage to drop the act. Because the real strength this world is dying for isn't found in noise or control. It's found in the quiet return to truth. To the honest, unguarded, beautiful self that's been waiting all this time. And friend, that's where the healing begins. I see you. And I'm still here. Now listen, this isn't about perfection. And it sure ain't about performing. It's about wholeness. A kind of wholeness this world doesn't clap for, because it doesn't shine under stage lights. No, this kind of wholeness happens in the shadows. In the still places. In the quiet rooms where the masks come off and the mirror doesn't lie. See, there's something we need to name today. A something slippery and dangerous that slinks around every wounded ego dressed like a judge of projection. The narcissist doesn't just carry pain. They throw it. Like a fire they can't extinguish, they toss it onto every soul close enough to burn. It ain't just a bad habit. It's survival. Their way of keeping their world from crashing down is by convincing everyone else that you're the problem. That you are what's broken. That you carry what's actually killing them from the inside out. You ever see someone throw blame like it's confetti? It's dizzying. A storm of accusations, they've of sideways glances, of twisted truths. That's not strength. That's someone trying to outrun their own reflection. Because what lies beneath that surface is a storm of ache and shame, and a longing they've never named. And oh, when they laugh at softness, when they scoff at kindness, when they call tenderness a flaw, that's not disdain. That's mourning. They grieve what they lost long ago. Maybe they were mocked for crying. Maybe they were punished for asking to be held. Somewhere along the way, they were taught that real strength doesn't feel. That real men don't long. So they buried it deep. So deep they forgot it was even there. But the soul remembers. So when they mock the soft-spoken, when they belittle the gentle, when they laugh at the honest, it's not because they don't feel. It's because they do. And that feeling terrifies them. Because if they ever let it in, even for a second, they're scared it might flood the whole house and wash them away. And what do they do with that terror? They aim it at you. They'll accuse you of disloyalty while quietly doubting their own worth. They'll call someone manipulative because deep down, they know how much they twist themselves just to feel in control. They'll paint their shadows onto others and walk away believing it was truth. Because facing their own mess feels like death, so they give it a new name and toss it in your direction. But here's where it gets even more tangled. Sometimes you'll notice this strange pull in the narcissist. An obsession with someone else. Not love. Not romance. Something quieter, heavier. They'll fixate. Compete. One moment praising, the next tearing down. You'll hear their name too often, see the glances too long, feel the tension too thick. And you wonder, what is this? Let me tell you, that's not rivalry. That's longing. That's a hunger buried under years of armor. It's the soul whispering, I wish I was more like him. But instead of admitting it, instead of owning that spark of admiration, they torch it. They insult what they envy. They smirk at what they secretly revere. Because admitting admiration would mean admitting lack. And to the narcissist, lack feels like death. They were taught a real man never admires, only conquers. That to say, he inspires me, is to say, I'm beneath him. And the shame of that belief builds walls so high, not even the truth can climb over. But truth doesn't stop knocking. Sometimes what looks like hate is actually heartbreak. What looks like competition is actually grief. The grief for the boy who never got to be soft. Grief for the version of themselves that could have been. If only someone had said, it's okay to feel. You're safe here. But instead of grieving, they perform. And in chasing the image of who they think they should be, they lose more and more of who they actually are. They confuse imitation with identity. They mirror the man they admire, not because they want to become him, but because they don't know who else to be. It's a cycle. Desire, denial, envy, attack. Round and round until it carves grooves so deep in the soul, they can't tell the difference between who they hate and who they want to be. But no performance can heal a shattered soul. And no amount of comparing, copying, crushing will ever make a heart feel whole again. If, just if, the narcissist could sit still long enough. If they could let the mirror speak without shattering it. If they could stop defending, deflecting, denying just for one breath. They might finally hear the words that could save them. You were never weak. You were wounded. You were never broken. Just afraid. And in that moment, right there, healing begins. Not through applause. Not through dominance, but through surrender, through softness, through finally letting the truth wrap its arms around the parts they tried to throw away. And that's the first step back home. Let me speak this with fire and grace. I don't have to be him. I just want to be free. That's not a whisper. That's a breakthrough. That's the sound of shackles loosening, of a soul turning back toward itself after a long exile. And oh, how long the narcissist has wandered. Starving, striving, surviving. Not because they're too strong to feel, but because they were taught that feeling was fatal. See, the rage they hurl at femininity, it ain't about superiority, it's about fear. Raw, bone, deep fear of the very things that could make them whole. Empathy. Surrender. Not the weak kind, no. The kind of power that bends but never breaks. That holds space. That heals. And that kind of power, that undoes them. Because the narcissist was trained young. Don't cry. Don't feel. Don't you dare need. And to survive in a world like that, they had to make a brutal choice: to carve the heart in half, show the world the part it liked, strong, sharp, unshakable, bury the rest, lock it up and swallow the key. But buried things don't stay buried. And every time that tenderness stirs beneath the surface, The narcissist flinches. So they attack. They ridicule. They recoil from what they've lost. That's why they laugh when someone breaks down. Why they mock softness in others. Why they flatten complex souls into stereotypes. They're not disgusted by weakness. They're haunted by it. By the memory of their own abandoned innocence. By the truth they weren't allowed to live. So what do? They build fortresses. Cold, calculated, clever, a little intellectual superiority, a little emotional detachment, a little misogyny, just enough to keep things rigid and predictable, and when someone comes along, free, feeling, fearless, that wall trembles. Instead of letting it fall, the narcissist throws up more bricks. Walls don't protect them, they isolate them. But that isolation, that's all they've ever known. And make no mistake, the fear isn't of others. The fear isn't themselves. The thought of being seen, not praised but seen, feels like death. Because to be seen means being touched. And to be touched means being known. And to be known means there's nowhere left to hide. So they trade intimacy for control, call it masculinity, call it strength. But underneath, it's just fear in a designer suit. Here's the heartbreak of it: you can't amputate your soul and expect to be whole. And the narcissist, in running from softness, runs from life. They run from the one thing that could save them, so they chase everything else: more sex, more status, more dominance. But it never quiets the eights, so they turn on the people who come close, the ones who love without condition. They call them needy, emotional, unreasonable, but the truth is, they just got too close. Now let's not lie. Society had a hand in this. We raised boys to be armor, not sons. We told them silence was strong, and that vulnerability was sin, and the narcissist drank that poison young. So by the time they're men, they've forgotten what their own heart sounds like. They just follow the rules, protect the maorsk, until they wake up one day, kings of nothing, alone in a kingdom of cold and relationships. My God, that they become war zones. The narcissist doesn't love. They don't partner, they perform. In the beginning, it's intoxicating, magnetic. They flood you with praise. They make you feel chosen, but it's not love, it's leverage, it's bait. Because the closer you get, the more dangerous it becomes. Not for you, for them. See, real intimacy would mean they have to drop the act. Let the guard down, let someone see the fear behind the fire, and they can't. So they turn cold, they twist your words, they rewrite the story. Suddenly, you're the problem. You're too demanding, too sensitive. But the truth, you just got too close to the truth they buried. And if that doesn't scare you away, they'll punish you for staying. They'll punish you for loving them. They'll cycle through phases, moments, stages. Searching, always searching, for something that'll let them keep the mask and feel whole. But that deal doesn't exist. Because the relationship they need most, the one that would break every chain, is the one they avoid at all costs, the one with their own heart. Because to truly love, to truly be loved, they'd have to be real. And they're terrified of what they might find. So, what happens? All that rage, all that projection, the obsession with other men, the fear of softness, the war on vulnerability, it all points to one battlefield. And that battlefield is within. Not with enemies, not with critics, not with partners, but with the self that was told, you're only worth something if you win. So yes, the narcissist wears armor. They project their pain. They reject the love they long for. But don't mistake survival for strength, because surviving ain't the same as living. And control ain't the same as peace. True strength, true healing, it's not found in dominance, it's not in applause, it's not in winning, it's in integration, it's in saying, without flinching, yes I feel, yes I need, yes, I've failed, and I'm still worthy. It's in reclaiming every piece of themselves, the fierce and the fragile, and saying, you belong with me. You until that day, the narcissist will keep spinning, keep blaming, keep searching. But healing begins the moment the performance stops, the moment the hand stops reaching for a mask and starts reaching for mercy. And freedom, the freedom is the moment they stop running from their reflection and start walking back home.